All right, so let's begin micro lesson 4.2, supporting learners with flexible content review. And so in this micro lesson, we'll look at a number of things. How do we define expectations for students' use of instructional materials as part of a flexible learning experience? How do we provide descriptive what, how, and why prompts that guide students to review the course materials successfully? How do we provide students with a checklist to evaluate web-based resources, including some of the ones that we provide, right? Because those links may expire and they may have to go look for something new. In my class, which is called How to Learn with Your Mobile Device, the articles that I post sometimes break in the middle of a term. So even though I check my links every beginning of the term before the class begins, sometimes the web changes without telling me, and students go look for their own solutions, and they need to know how to evaluate if it's as good as the original that I had proposed. Also, exploring tools that provide students opportunities to engage with classmates around course content, things like social reading and collaborative annotation. If you've read any work by Janae Cohn at Sac State, I know she talks about that quite a bit. So why are we doing this? Because we need to go beyond simply listing the content that students should review and really make it part of the learning process. So, expectations. We shouldn't assume that simply by providing students with links to readings, videos, and other media that they'll know what they're expected to do with all of those different pieces of media. In a flexible course environment that provides multiple pathways to participate and complete the activities, students may not even know what's required and what's simply an alternate pathway or something optional that will help them expand their thinking, or a nice to have, not a need to have. So it's important that we clarify our expectations. And there are 3 different ways we can do that. One is just to put right in the title whether or not it's required. So in my class, I have review piece of text or whatever, and then in parentheses, I put required. And then if I have more information, I put it in a separate section called deeper dive or something like that. And then I put parentheses optional. So right there in the title, students know if it's something that they really need to consume to be successful in the activities we're going to complete. And all the other ones are nice to have information if they have time or interest. Also, knowing how much is required. Different cultures are used to reading every word that's assigned to them from the instructor. And so if you have a 200-page textbook, 200-page textbook chapter, and you only want them to read 50 of those pages, make sure they know what page numbers to visit. And if it's good for them to read the other pages to get more context or more information, great, but let them know what's the bare minimum. This is what you need to be successful in reaching the learning outcomes for this class. And then we also have the when. So different aspects of when is it nice, when do you need to know this by? And then last, how. Students may want some helpful tips. Again, first generation students may not have strategies for consuming materials. There are things called skeletal notes that guide students in taking notes as they review content. There are supplementary materials that support students who need more background information or support students who need a greater challenge. And then even digital flashcard decks for study after the initial content review. Those can be ways that you can provide additional resources, diagrams, infographics, things like that, so that they know what they're supposed to do with it. And so the next, we've talked about the what, the why, and the how before. When it comes to the transparent assignment template. We can adapt that same framework to helping our students understand why they're reviewing specific content, knowing what it is exactly they need to review, and how they can be successful. What are the criteria, maybe a little mini quiz to help them check their understanding, or some sort of activity that's low stakes, but helps them determine whether or not they have to go back and review the material again before they get to a high stakes quiz or a big project. Many of you were interested in knowing more about helping students evaluate web-based resources. These three different guides are just three of many that are out there, and your own campuses may have some great knowledge or information competence resources. Sometimes students, again, are searching for additional materials to make sense of course topics. In flexible course experiences, students may do this more than usual. And even the web-based resources, as I mentioned before, that we vet and recommend can change over time. So University of Hawaii Hilo recommends the ABCDE method, which is checking for authority, bias, content, date, and evaluation. So it's got some evaluation themes with a set of questions under each letter. UC Berkeley uses 6 criteria: authority, purpose, publication and format, relevance, date of publication, and documentation. And then the Stark State University uses the 5 W questions: who, what, when, where, and why, to evaluate websites. And so just giving students a concrete strategy to say, hey, is this material valid? Is it biased? If you're going to use it as a source for one of your works, let's make sure that you can trust it. And then how can we help students work together for content review? Again, some students are collaborative learners. They might come from cultures that are more interdependent than independent. They might come from a family background where the family learns together by doing the work and modeling, co-creating knowledge. So there are some collaboration and annotation tools out there that allow us to help students work together to review text, audio, or video. So if you've used Hypothesis like Betsy is doing with her inline discussions and annotations, or eMargin is another tool that does the same thing. Students can read, highlight different passages of text, and make comments on the text. And you, as the instructor, can preload the text with prompts like, hey, once you finish this section, I have a question for you. Or you can encourage students to keep the highlights off until they've finished the piece, and then turn them on and see if they highlighted the same thing as all the other students. So this social reading or collaborative text annotation is a way for students to work together to understand text so that they don't feel like, I don't get this, and how I don't know if I should or can ask for help. It's built into the process. And then those collaborative text annotation tools, some of them, like Perusall, offer full textbooks that students can read, review, and annotate together. And then tools like Google Drive allow teachers to create their own files for students to review, comment on, even edit together. So it's just a matter of creativity and thinking through what it is you want to do. And I remember seeing in a previous micro lesson in this series, somebody talked about Perusall. So I know that some of you are using these tools, and look forward to hearing more about how you're doing it. Collaborative audio annotation can include tools like SoundCloud, which a lot of people recognize as a vehicle for up-and-coming music artists to share their work for the world to consume. But it's also a place where you can have some sort of audio file that might be something that you want your students to comment on. So those comments get added to specific points in the timeline or playback timeline. So you can see little marks and jump straight to the comments. or click on the comment and listen to what it's about. You can listen to the audio at that point instead of having to scrub through, let's say, 15 or 30 minutes of audio. So William agrees that this is a possibility for students to, again, collaborate. And it's, I like the word you used, William, brilliant. And then last but not least, if you have videos that you want students to annotate, video and Vialogs are two tools that allow students to review and comment on videos, similar to SoundCloud. The comments are attached to specific points in the video timeline. So again, you can click on the comment and see the video that students are commenting on, if they had a question, if they really liked something, if they marked it as an example of a class concept and practice and action, however you want to use the videos, it's all possible. There are a few tools out there that support collaborative review of multiple media types. For example, Classroom Salon, students can annotate both text-based documents and videos using that tool. So if you know that you're going to mix up your media, you might look for something like Classroom Salon that allows students to do both. All right. So here we are. It's time to get busy. And for this activity, we're going to have a choice like we've done in the past. So you can either outline some content review expectations and maybe even draft a prompt related to a piece of content that you have. You can maybe choose a framework for students to evaluate web-based resources, either one of the three that I shared, or go out and look for your own, see if your own campus has one. It's always nice to point students to your own campus resources. So maybe check in with the library faculty or staff on your campus to see if they recommend or have created any guides for students to evaluate web-based resources. And then the last activity you can complete is to explore annotated collaborative annotation tools. And so I'm going to put some links in the chat for you all so that you can get started. And I have to check to see if I have created the ones that you can copy for your own use later. If not, I will do that and make sure they're in the master folder with everything else. I'm going to stop sharing so I can take a look and see all of you popping in those documents. We'll take about 5 minutes just to collaboratively put together some different ideas, and then we'll jump on to our next micro lesson. Leslie, I see your hand up. I don't know if that's from before, but I do recognize that I need to make these editable, and I'm doing that right now. So if you are letting me know that in the chat, I beat you to it.
Sorry, Kevin, I forgot to take it down earlier. All good.
Okay, so all three links that I shared in the chat are now editable documents, not just something that's nice to look at. For that, we can look at Rebecca's background, which is beautiful. All right, and while you are all hard at work, I made the different versions, blank copies that you can just click the link and it'll ask you to create a copy for yourself. And while you're working, William says, back to an earlier conversation, sequencing versus housing of information. Content review is another layer where students would have to go to a different space, or content review could be built in as a page prior to the content within a module. This is true. So putting in class or study time in parentheses in the title of the page may help. Absolutely, William, especially if you expect that students are going to be mode switching, because they're in class one day and online another, letting them know that this is something that's was done in class that they need to catch up, or something that they will do in class, so save it. All that helps them make decisions, because time is not our friend. Good points. All right, so I'll give you one more 37-second period of time, just because it seems like a good number. And then we'll move on to our last micro lesson. Saw somebody used Canvas Studio as an example of another tool that could be used for annotation purposes. So that's great to share. Thank you. All right, so I'm going to stop the recording for our asynchronous friends. And then when we return in literally seconds, we will start micro lesson 4.3.